In this tutorial, we're going to generate this chain link fence to be applied to some geometry inside of Maya. Rather than create the geometry in Maya, we're going to start by creating the texture map first, so we have it as a template to get the proportions that we need. I'm starting with a document that's 28 inches by 28 inches, 72 dpi, because that's the size of the UV map I'll probably generate when I make the model in Maya. So I want the proportions to be somewhat close. We'll start by creating a new layer. I'm going to use my guide to define a 1-inch square anywhere inside of my document. So I'll zoom in on this a bit so I can be precise about the guides. I'm going to hit U on the keyboard to take me to the Bezier path tool, and I wanted the rounded rectangle. I'll make sure that it's set for path in the upper right hand corner. I'll click inside my document. I'm going to leave the width and height at 100 as the default, but I've changed the radius to 10 pixels all the way around. And when I click OK, it generates the shape that I want. I'll hit Command T, and I'll start to move this into the corner of the guides. Holding the Shift key, I'll drag from the lower right corner and scale it proportionally to that square I just generated with the grid, and I'll hit Return. I'm going to be on the keyboard, and I'm going to make my brush a hard edge brush, and I'm going to set the pixels for 5. I'll hit P on the keyboard, and if I right click inside that path selection, I can go to Stroke Path. I'm making sure that white is on top before I go any further, because I want the fence to be white to start with. I'll choose Brush and click OK. I'll now hit Return to get rid of the path. I'm going to zoom in on this a bit because I want to put a bevel and emboss on, and I want to also put an inner glow. And I'm using a dark value for the inner glow. I've set it for black, and it's pretty subjective how you want this to look, but what you'll see now is that we've got the makings of our first link for our fence. I'll click OK, and now I'm going to hit Command T to get the transform tool. I'm going to rotate that 45 degrees so that it looks like a diamond now. I'm going to need 9 copies of this. So I'll hit V on the keyboard, hold down my Option and Shift, and I'll drag one down to the bottom. Then I'll drag one up to the top. I'll select the diamond shape in the middle, holding the Option Shift, drag one there and across to the other side. And I'll Option Shift and drag another one up here. Option Shift and drag another one here, there, and the 9th one. Now I'm going to move my guide so I can generate the pattern I want. I'll hit V on the keyboard. You can put guides in your document with whatever tool is on the toolbar, but to reposition you need to use the Move tool. So I'm starting with the Move tool, and I'm going to go and visually cut in half vertically the outside rows of my diamond shapes, and then I'll cut the horizontal ones in half as well. So what's in the middle now is going to generate that pattern that we desire. I'll hit M on the keyboard, making sure I have my rectangle selection tool. I'm going to go to View and make sure that Snap to Guides is on. It'll just make it a little more accurate. I'll click and drag across to make my selection. I'm turning off the background, and I'll go to Edit, Define Pattern. I'll deselect, and I'm going to go to the top of my layer order and put a new blank layer in. I'm doing that because I know that if I put a pattern on a layer, it doesn't generate its own layer. It will cover what happens to be there at the time. I'll put the black background on again for reference. I'll go to Edit, Fill. I'll go to the Content and choose Pattern. And then the Custom Patterns, I'll choose the last entry. And now I've got my chain link generated the way I want. I'm going to turn off the reference layers. And I'm going to get rid of my guides. Now I'm going to define the size of the fence section I want. I'll hit M on the keyboard for my rectangle marquee, and I'll drag the shape I think I need for my file. Well, this is pretty subjective by now, so you'll have your own take on this. Once I've made my selection, I'll go down to my layer mask icon and click on it. I'm going to introduce a new blank layer. And I'm going to use my rectangle marquee tool again. I'm going to drag across the top of the fence to define the shape and length of the fence structure. I'll fill that with white. And I'm going to introduce a bevel and emboss to that. And then I'll also put the inner glow on to add a bit of darkness to it. Once I have what I want, I'm going to rasterize the layer by right-clicking on it and choosing Rasterize Layer. I'm going to hit Command J, which will give me a copy of that. I'll hit Command T to transform. I'll right-click and choose Rotate 90 degrees. And I'll put that on one side of the fence section. Holding the Option key down, I'll drag on the top or bottom to reduce both sides at the same time. And I'll decide how long I want that fence section to be. Once I have one on that side, I'll hit Command A to select it. Hit V on the keyboard. Holding down the Option and the Shift, I'll drag another section over to the other side. I'm going to deselect and save. I want one little bit of detail on the top here, a little finial or a shape that might finish off a fence. I'll introduce another new layer. I'll get the marquee. I'll change the elliptical marquee. I'll make a very small selection. Fill it with white. And again, I'm going to go for the bevel and emboss, and then the inner glow. I'm going to hit Command T because I'd like this to be more oblong, more of an ellipse. I've got the shape I want, but I want to cut off the bottom and put another detail line across it. So I'll get my marquee, go back to the rectangle marquee, cut off a bit of this. And with my brush, I'll set it to about 20 pixels. And then I'll paint just below it all the way across. With my Move tool, I'll put this into position. Scale, a marquee select, an Option drag copy to the other side. Our fence pattern is almost finished now. I'm going to merge the layers that we used to create it. I'll Shift select them and I'll go to Merge Layers or hit Command E on the keyboard. Now I'm going to be using this to generate a number of sections of the fence, and I need them to meet seamlessly. So I'm going to get my marquee tool, and I'm first going to drag guides that will split each of the fence posts on either side in half. With my marquee tool, I'll select from one side to the other, top to bottom, and I'm going to add my layer mask. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a template that will allow me to create the geometry to proportion of the fence inside of Maya. So I'm going to go to the top of the layer order. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to choose Edit, Copy Merged, and then I'm going to paste. Now what you'll see is at the top of your layer order there is a section of fence with a black background. I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And I'm going to name it fence template. And I'll put it in my folder. Just bear in mind when you use alpha channels, bump maps, or template reference drawings, they have to be JPEGs for Maya. Now we're ready to go into Maya and start to build the geometry for our fence.